welcome. Thank you for joining me. Grayboardgamer here with another playthrough, as promised, of 4 Against Darkness. I got a lot of requests to do another playthrough. Normally I wouldn't do another playthrough of a game that I did so recently, but this one has got a really great response, and the fact that it's such a low-priced option for people, I just wanted to do another one right away. This time through we're going to use the 4 characters that we didn't use in the first playthrough. So this time through I'm going to have a warrior, a cleric, an elf, and a halfling. I'm not going to go over the rules as much in this playthrough. If you haven't seen my first playthrough, I suggest you watch that first to get a hang of the rules before diving into this one. And finally, before we start, this playthrough will count as the wildcard playthrough here in the first wave of Season 1. The previous game that I did, Lucidity, I mistakenly said that that was going to be a mid-range price game, but that's actually going to be my choice. In each wave, there's going to be a game under 20, one 20 to 50, and then one above 50. And then also one game that's my choice and one game that's a wildcard option for anyone that pledges at that level on the Patreon page. But no one has pledged at that level yet, so I'm going to use that selection to play this playthrough of 4 Against Darkness. We already know that coming up we have Bios Megafauna. That's going to be our higher price game, which means you'll see a couple of polls coming up soon to select the other 2 games that are going to be in Wave 1. An option under 20 and an option from 20 to 50. Without further delay, let's get started. This time through, I'm going to use some sheets that I saw in a solo board gaming group on Facebook, and I went to Board Game Geek and downloaded and printed these up to use them. There are several sheets that I'll be using for this playthrough, and I'll provide a link in the description below so you can also go there and print these out. This is my first time using them, but they look like they're going to be a great benefit to gameplay. Looks like it really keeps things organized and keeps the game moving along at a pretty good pace. They were created by user Mike Keller and his Board Game Geek name MadMac72. Again, you can find a link to these in the description below. Let's take a moment to get to know our group of adventurers. First up, we have Jack Thor the Warrior. This name and all the other names, I literally just went to a fantasy name generator that I just Googled, put in classes or races for fantasy characters, and the first name that came up, that's what I picked. All of our characters, we're going to start at level 1. Jack Thor here has a life of 7, only 1 gold remaining because I've already purchased items, and he currently has light armor, a shield, and a sword. Next we have our Cleric, Elbor. 5 life, no gold remaining. The Cleric's special ability is they get to add their level when attacking undead creatures. The Cleric starts with light armor, a shield, a mace, and purchased a lantern. Also, we'll be starting with 3 blessing and 3 healing. Let me move this up. And the way this works here is if the inner circle is colored in, like on these 3 uses here, that means it's ready to be used. When I do cast it or use it, I'll fill in the rest of the circle so we know that it's no longer available. Next up we have our Elf, Deathwin, 5 life, no gold remaining, +1 attack and spells versus orcs, and that's in quotes because as long as the word orc or orcs is in the creature's name, that bonus applies, and plus level to spell casting rolls. Dothwin starts with light armor, a sword, a bow with 12 arrows, and has some bandages. And the 1 spell that the elf can have, 1 per level, per adventure, is sleep. I'm choosing to track my ammo with the bow. You don't have to do this. You can just say that you have the arrows that you need. But I'm going to go ahead and track and say that Dothwin starts with 12 arrows. That's what it says is a good starting amount in the rulebook. You can purchase more, but I don't have that much money left, so I'm going to stick with the 12 that I have. And finally, we have our Halfling, Guardfus Gamwich, 4 life, 2 gold remaining. He gets to add his level to defense when going against giants, trolls, or ogres, and he has luck of 2. Things like bow ammo and luck, I'll explain how they work in the context of the game when it's time to use them. Our little halfling Guardfus Gamwich doesn't have a lot of combat prowess. All he has is a club and a sling with 12 sling bullets, and those both attack at a -1 because they're pretty light, small weapons. He's not that big anyway. And he also has a bandage available. Guardfus Gamwich is our lantern bearer currently, and you can see that the circle is filled in. He purchased that and filled it in. We have a spare lantern over here with Aelbor. She's carrying a lantern in her equipment, not in her hand, so she has both of our hands still available to hold that shield and mace. We just have that lantern as a backup in case something bad happens to Guardfus, like being turned to stone, and then our lantern that he has is unusable. And here's the sheet where our dungeon will be drawn on. It is a 20 by 28 grid. And we even have our handy table right here when we roll to look at. And down here, you even have the basic manual page numbers for the major things you need to look up along the way. So Mike Keller looks like you did a really great job at putting these sheets together. And along with that, so you don't have to keep flipping through pages, he made a comprehensive sheet showing the entrance rooms and any of the other rooms or corridors that you roll when selecting what comes next. He also put together this little card. If you have miniatures, you can place them on here to keep track of your marching order. And then he has an explanation of how to use his encounter key and character sheet spells key. And here's the encounter sheet. You get a whole bunch of encounters on one page that you can use. And you can see as you zoom in, each section has a ton of information. It makes it much easier to track, less writing for you. All you gotta do is print these pages out. And I'll go into detail on how to use these when we come into our first encounter. First, we need to see what our entrance room looks like, and they are right here on the sheet 1 through 6. And I've retired those terrible dice after what they did to me in the first playthrough. And when I do roll these, we're going to use the green as the first digit and the white as the second. In this case, we're only going 1 to 6 for our entrance, and this time it is room number 6. We have made our entrance into the dungeon. This is our entrance room, and I made a mistake in my first playthrough and rolled for contents of the entrance, which you do not do. So we just need to choose, do we want to go west or do we want to go east? I'm going to choose to go to the east. And before we head that direction, we need to worry about our marching order. We have to be careful and not place 2 of the weakest characters in the rear, because then we have the situation where if something sneaks up from behind, a wandering monster, then our 2 weakest characters are stuck if it's a corridor being our main attack. And in this playthrough, unlike the other, we have a bow and we have a sling, which means that they are able to shoot over their comrades, so that is helpful too. We definitely want our warrior up front. The elf and the cleric both have 5 life. The cleric is more armored with the shield and light armor. The elf just has light armor. So I think these 2 are a good balance already. So we'll leave it just the way it is. Jack Thor and Aelbor up front with Dothwin and Guardfus in the rear. And now I'm rethinking, because that would put both of our ranged weapons in the rear, but I think that's okay, because as long as we're smart about switching our marching order around when we're going into a known corridor, then we should be okay. We can have them in the front, so when we get attacked from the rear, these 2 can be in the back with our ranged characters lobbing rounds over top. So we'll keep it simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, leave it just like it is on the paper. Our group has headed down that corridor to the east, Let's see which room or corridor they will encounter. We're going to roll 2d6. Remember, the green is the first number. And we're going to have a 63. We can see that 63 is a continuation of the corridor, but it's going to give us a couple of doors also. So let me go ahead and add that on here. Those doors will give us a couple more options since we're approaching the edge of the dungeon border here. Let's see what's inside this corridor. Let's see what we have inside our first corridor. We rolled an 8. That means the corridor is empty and we can search if we want to. Before we search, I'm going to flip our marching order and put Jack Thor and Elbor in the rear with Dothwin and Gardfus in the front. Now we have our marching order reversed. We'll search this corridor. It'll be -1 to the roll. We got a 3, taking it down to a 2, which means we have an empty corridor. We have our empty corridor that we have searched. We can continue to the east, which is going to be tight quarters, or we can head north or south through the door. I think I'll head to the south so we can fill in this area down here. So we'll go through this door. Before we go through the door, we'll put our marching order back in the original order with the warrior and cleric up front. And we're headed through that door. We have a 55. We're headed through our door to the south. We have our new corridor drawn in. We need to see what's inside of it. We had to end it 1 square short because it ran into the entrance room. What are we dealing with inside this corridor? A 7, which means we get to roll on the minions table. We're going to deal with our first group of minions, and it's going to be D6 + 1 orcs. So how many orcs do we have? 5 + 1, 6. Tight corridor. Before we start this fight, here's a quick look at our encounter sheet. We put this as the first group of minions that we've encountered. This is not boss or vermin, so we wouldn't mark that off. The orcs are level 4, and there are 6 of them total, and they get 1 attack per round. So we'll mark them off as we go. We're not going to attempt any reactions with the orcs, because on a 1 or a 2, we can bribe them. But I don't have enough gold to bribe them, and I'm not that worried about it. And anything else we roll is going to be a fight of some kind, so at least if we go first, that means we get the initial attack. So let's go ahead and go at this group of 6 orcs. Remember, we are in a corridor, so we're only going to be fighting 2 on 2. Our 2 front characters, Jack Thor the warrior and Elbor the cleric, versus the orcs. Now we can have Dothwin and Gardfus change their weapons over and lob some rounds in that direction, but we'll make that determination after the first round of attacks. First up, we have Jack Thor. He's going to swing his sword at the orcs. With an attack, he can add his level, so he'll get a +1. His sword doesn't give him any additional bonuses, so this is going to be strictly a +1. Added on to a 4, which is not a great start, but it's not terrible either. So he did score a 5. That's enough to take out 1 of these level 4 orcs. Our first orc is eliminated, and it looks like it might be a good idea to have them switch weapons in the rear. Next we have our cleric, Elbor. She's going to use her mace to attack. She gets to add half of her level, rounded down. She's only level 1, so rounded down would be to 0, so that's not going to help us any. So this is just a straight attack because the mace does not give a +1. Oh, that's an automatic miss anyway. Our heroes in the rear were carrying their sword and club, so they're going to take this turn to switch over to their ranged weapons. Dothwin will get out her bow, and Gardfus Gamwich will get out his sling. Our characters now have to defend. First we got Jack Thor, who has light armor and a shield, and those are going to both give him a +1 each. So he's going to get +2 to his defense roll, and these are level 4 creatures. That's an automatic success, nothing to worry about for Jack Thor. Elbor, our cleric, also has light armor and a shield, so She will get a +2. Added onto a 3, which is a 5, and that's just enough to defend against the attack. And that'll bring it back around to our characters. We'll have Jack Thor go again, +1 thanks to his level. And that is a 6. Not enough to take out any additional orcs, but still he cuts down another one with his sword. We're down 2 orcs. We'll see if the Cleric can bash one down with her mace. So our Cleric will now go. She gets no modifiers. Oh, and comes up one short. We're going to have Dothwin fire an arrow from the back row. She gets to add her level to an attack, plus she gets another additional +1 because these are orcs and she is an elf. She knocks an arrow on her bow. 5 + 2 is 7, just one short of killing 2 orcs with 1 arrow. But she managed to take out one also. Another orc taken out. They're down to half. They go down one more below half, and we're going to have to check that morale. We'll have our little guy in the back there, Guardfoos, go ahead and get a sling stone ready to attack, but his attack is going to be at a -1. So he's going to need a really good roll here. Oh, no good. The orcs get to attack. I did reduce the arrow and sling bullet count by 1. They each have 11 respectively now. In the game, anytime an arrow or sling stone is used, it is considered lost and destroyed. I don't think we're going to use any more on this encounter. The first orc will attack Jack Thor, who gets his +2. That's an easy defense. And Aelbor. Oh, that's not enough. That's only a 4. We needed to get higher than the orc's level. So she will take a wound and be down to 4 life. Let's see if our front 2 can take these orcs down at least one more. We'll have Jack Thor attack. +1. Oh, it's an explosive 6. This is going to be epic. Come on, Jack Thor. So it's 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Oh, so close to taking out all 3 remaining. But he did take out 2 more. Very nice. We're down to just 1 orc remaining. We'll have that orc test morale to see if he sticks around to avenge his buddies or if he runs away. A roll of 3 or less and the orcs flee. He sticks around to fight, which means he's going to have to face Aelbor's mace. She raises the mace up over her head, ready to bring it down on our orc, and smashes him right on the forehead, taking our final orc out. Our 6th and final orc is defeated, giving us a victory over our first group of minions. Well, we get to roll on the treasure table, although orcs don't have magic. So if magic comes up, we'll have to roll for how much gold it is instead. And it's a 1, so it's going to be gold anyway. And it's not going to be much. D6 gold pieces. 5 gold, we'll take it. We split that gold between Aelbor and Jack Thor. I think we're going to go ahead and head south through this door to go and finish off this area, unless it starts going to the east also. On the other side of that door from our orc corridor, our group finds 65. Well, there's no way to rotate 65 that gives us anything other than a tiny little room here, so let's go ahead and draw it in. We have a tiny little corridor here. Let's see what we have inside. Inside our corridor, we have 8, which means it's empty and we can search it. Before we search it, of course, we will flip our marching order and put Dothwin and Guardfoos up front in case a wandering monster appears from some magical place in this tiny little room. Well, I assume they would just come through the door. This is a corridor, so again at -1. And it's a 6 minus 1, so I found something. I get to choose. Find a clue, a secret door, or a hidden treasure. I'm going to choose to take a clue. So we'll move down here to the bottom, and there's a spot for clues. And we'll put it on Elbor's character. We're going to need to backtrack now. I was debating on whether or not to take a clue or possibly add a secret door here and go into this direction, but I want to start getting clues early so I can get up to 3. So we're going to have to backtrack through the room where the orcs were defeated and get us back into our corridor here. So we're going to have to backtrack through 2 areas. So we'll have to roll and see if we run into a wandering monster. We'll flip our marching order with Dothwin and Guardfoos Gamwich up front. That way if a wandering monster attacks from the rear in these corridor areas, we don't have our weaker characters in the back. Our first area where the orcs were, wandering monster right away. Let's see what wandering monster we're going to have to deal with. Remember, they don't have any treasure. A 5. That's going to be a weird monster. The weird monster sneaking up on us is invisible gremlins. Oh no. This is pretty bad. We might have to punch and kick our way through the dungeon if they steal all our stuff. Let's see how many items we're going to lose here. 1 plus 3 objects. Now they take them in the order of preference: magic items, scrolls, potions, weapons, gems, coins. Well, we don't have any magic items, scrolls, or potions, so next they're going to get to our weapons. This is a tough situation. Well, we'll definitely get rid of the sling and the bow first, but we need to get rid of 2 more weapons. Definitely get rid of the club, since it's at a -1 to attack. So that's 3. Do we get rid of the sword from the elf or the mace from the cleric? If we get rid of the mace, that leaves us only with 2 cutting weapons and no blunt edge weapons. But the elf gets to add her level when she attacks, and the cleric only gets to add half of her level. So if we drop the sword, she's going to be fighting at a -2. But adding her level means she gets to add 1 back on, so it's only a -1. If the cleric loses her mace, she's going to be fighting at a -2. Alright, so we'll drop the sword, bow, club, and sling. I know that invisible gremlins do not give you an XP roll, but should they count as an encounter with a minion? I know a boss does, and wandering monsters that are minions count. I think as a judgment call, I would say no, that they do not count, because you really don't do anything other than get robbed by them. And since they don't grant you an XP roll, I don't think they should count towards your minion track. If I'm wrong, or you think I should interpret it another way, please let me know. But we have 1 more area to backtrack through. Hopefully we don't run into any more wandering monsters. And we will not. So we've made it back into the corridor here, and we're going to head to the north. We're a lot lighter as far as equipment goes. Our elf and halfling are going to have to ninja kick and punch their way until we can find more weapons for them, hopefully. But we're going to head as a group towards the north through this door. Our marching order before we go through the door is back to Jack Thor and Aelbor up front. Through the door we have 51. That's going to give us some more options. Our group continues to find nothing but corridors, but let's see what we have inside this corridor. And we have a lot of exit options here, so we're really not locked into one area. Inside the room we have, inside the corridor we have 6 vermin. A 4 will give us D6 giant centipedes. Ooh, 6 of them. This group of vermin will not count as a minion. We have our giant centipedes, level 3. There are 6 of them. If a character takes a wound, they have to save versus a level 2 poison if wounded, and if they fail, they have to take an additional wound. We have our warrior up front, ready to attack. He's going to get a +1 by adding his level. We could use a good roll here. And we're not going to get a great roll, but that's enough to take one of them out. And before we go to the sheet, since that's only one removed, we don't have to worry about morale checks or anything like that. We'll have Elbor go ahead and go. Hers is a straight roll. Oh, and she gets the 6. +2 is 8. That's enough to take out 2 of them. Nice. Very good. So we have Jack Thor taking out 1, and Elbor. Luckily, we kept that mace with her. She really is doing good with it. So we've already eliminated half of our centipedes. Our characters in the back have no weapons. We're in a corridor. They have nothing to use at a distance. So now the centipedes will each attack Jack Thor and Elbor. Hopefully we don't have any wounds here. So Jack Thor, light armor and a shield. These things are level 3. That's 2 + 2 is 4. So anything other than the 1 is going to be successful. Next we have Elbor. Same result. Anything but a 1 means that she would defend also because of her light armor and shield. So we can go back into our next round of attacks, starting with Jack Thor, +1. Oh, he's going to get that 6. And 5 is 11, +1 is 12. That's enough to wipe out 4 centipedes, but there's only 3 remaining. That was a very successful combat against that group of vermin. Nobody took a wound. Nobody had to worry about checking for poison. They don't have any treasure, I believe. No, they do not. But we can go ahead and move on further into the dungeon. Do we want to stay closer to the wall here, or do we want to open up this area possibly? I think we'll head through the door here, the one that's over to the west more, and see what we have there. On the other side of that door